Cut to the chase. This is a brief clip from the Yojo Show podcast, where we dive into everything: politics, tech, aviation, space, science, health, and medicine. Stick around for conversation that clips right to what matters.
Well, this week on Truth Bomb Consequences Edition, I don't know what is more, amusing or disturbing or any other adjective. The news about Microsoft founder Bill Gates or the news about failed CNN host Don Lemon. Let's start with Bill Gates, shall we? The tech zillionaire and vaccine enthusiast, seen here with public health supremo Anthony Fauci. Gates' name was mentioned in the latest Department of Justice drop of Jeffrey Epstein emails. And guess what, folks? It seems that back in 2013, Epstein wrote an email to himself in what appears to have been a file note about an argument he says he had with Gates, alleging that not only did Gates engage in sex with Russian girls, giving them the jab, as it were, but that he also contracted an STD and asked for antibiotics he could surreptitiously give to his wife, Melinda. Because, well, apparently the world's most famous software engineer wasn't taking enough precautions against viruses. Now, again, these are all allegations from Jeffrey Epstein, someone who might be considered an unreliable witness, and there are reports that Epstein had drafted the emails on behalf of one of Gates' aggrieved employees. And the Gates Foundation, of course, we have to say this, had issued a statement saying that the claims in these emails are, quote, absurd and false. But I guess it's just a funny coincidence, then, that in this very same year, 2013, when all this was alleged to have gone down, that Bill Gates offered a prize of $100,000 to whomever could invent a so-called super condom. And by the way, he never paid off that bet. But in 2021, he did write a check for billions of dollars to his now ex-wife Melinda, who left him in part because of his ties to Epstein. Funny that, but not as funny, frankly, as the FAFO comeuppance being experienced by CNN has-been Don Lemon. Last seen in what can only be described as the invasion of a Baptist church in Minnesota, which was targeted last month by anti-Trump, anti-immigration enforcement protesters because of claims the pastor had ties to ICE. Here's a bit of what that looked like. And Don Lemon himself, walking or in fact crossing the line between journalist and activist, also confronted the pastor in question.
We're here to worship Jesus.
Yes.
That's why we're here.
Yes.
Okay, that's why we're here. Okay. That's what we're about.
Don't you think Jesus would be understanding
we're about
and love these folks?
We're about spreading the love of Jesus.
But did you try to talk to them as a Christian?
No one is willing to talk.
Okay.
I have to take care of my church and my family, so I asked that you actually would also leave this building.
You don't want us to chronicle what happened?
Unless you're here to worship.
I'm always worship. I'm a Christian.
We're here to worship.
Yeah.
We're here to worship. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Well, here the very Christian Lemon reveled in how his group chased people out of the church, saying the action he participated in was traumatic and uncomfortable. And that was the whole point.
You know, I've imagined it's uncomfortable and traumatic for the people here. But again, careful, it's very slippery right here. Yeah. It's uncomfortable and traumatic for the people here, but that's what really, careful, please, really slippery. Not kidding. That's what protesting is about. And so
Yes, well, Lemon may have gotten himself in a bit of trouble here because guess what? Federally speaking, that sort of trouble is a bit of a no-no. Because while the First Amendment protects freedom of speech, it also protects freedom of worship and the right to worship unmolested by people like Don Lemon. And thanks to something called the FACE Act, which was designed in part and perhaps ironically to protect access to abortion clinics, it is specifically a federal crime to interfere with services at religious houses of worship. And as they say, play stupid games, win stupid prizes, because Lemon has now been arrested and indicted on 2 counts by a federal grand jury on charges of federal civil rights violations, to which I say, good. Of course, the usual suspects are losing their mind. MS Now, you'll remember it as MSNBC, is calling the FACE Act an obscure law that's being used against him. Don't you love this reasoning? This is the weirdest defense I've heard since they were all screaming that Renee Good shouldn't have been shot because she was wearing a beanie. And ironically, an anti-Trump outfit calling itself, get this, the Not Above the Law Coalition, has issued a furious statement suggesting that, well, maybe in this case, Don Lemon should be above the law.
Epstein, any comments on, obviously there's still so much going around. The only thing, I did see a video that showed that there does appear to be someone wearing orange, which would be like the jumpsuits they wear in prison, going up the stairs. So you just see a little sliver going up the stairs at 10:29 p.m. or something to Epstein's cell area. That's new. That wasn't shown before. They now have included this missing clip, which shows someone moving up. So was it someone wearing that sort of garb for? Was it
like we discussed in a few prior episodes regarding Epstein, when we shared that clip about the missing video clip of and all the memes of Hillary Clinton and everything like that? Jails are where criminals live and stay. And a lot of murder happens in jails, right? Sure. So it's not out of the picture that someone or many people contracted criminals in jail to assassinate him. That's completely logical, which is why some people, when they're in jail, even innocently, for example, when Tommy Robinson is arrested, he has to be in solitary confinement because the jails in the UK are filled with Muslims and they will all murder him if they can get their hands on him. So even though he's in jail for very minor crimes, really no crimes at all, aside from speech, which is a huge crime in the UK, unfortunately. He has to be in solitary confinement, not because he acted wrong, but because for his own protection, quote unquote. So Epstein, I think, was supposed to be in solitary confinement, but he did have a roommate, so maybe not. It's very likely that it was a criminal that assassinated him. There's no question about that. It doesn't necessarily have to be a guard. There are many ways to kill a person. As the saying goes, there are many ways to skin a lamb, isn't that? There's some
skin a cat.
Skin a cat.
Skin a cat. I wouldn't want to do either, but yeah. And then listen, so there's obviously a lot of stuff being looked at, a lot more bad news for the royal family and the former prince. And look, I think that it's still, we need more time to see really what's going to come of all this. But we talk millions and millions of files, a lot of crazy pictures. Bill Clinton didn't come out unscathed. There's a lot of pictures with former President Clinton. But time will tell, and I think we'll come back to this, obviously, when there's more information. And Don Lemon, what are your thoughts on that? I know.
Just to note a few things on the Epstein files first. One of the names that dropped is Elon's name, Elon Musk. He has been one of the biggest proponents of arresting, sending to jail anybody who's involved with criminal acts. There are a lot of people that Epstein emailed or communicated with that didn't.
I think only second to Trump, who outed Epstein here in Palm Beach County.
Yeah, exactly. Although Trump and the administration have been a little kind of coy more recently on that. But
I think it's because of the mass number of people on the right and left that had something that, even if it wasn't completely illegal, was certainly not flattering. And we're talking about a lot of people. There's the owner of a sports team that should remain nameless and so forth. And that might be part of the thing, that there's obviously so many massive people, because Epstein obviously was very good at schmoozing people and getting them.
With everyone. He really
was interacting with so many people. And the question is how much of that is actually a real problem versus somebody saying, hey, if he's trying to set someone up, he's like, hey, take a picture with them. Let's get a couple of pictures. Not understanding what the pictures might be said to represent. So I think that's part of the issue. But yeah. I think we'll know more as time goes on with
I think like we discussed it in the past, we saw Trump went to some of his parties because all of the who's who in New York went to some of his parties. So the fact that you went to some of his parties doesn't necessarily mean anything. Right. And the fact that you emailed with him. So Elon never went to any of his parties on his plane or to his island. So that really any lack of evidence. But what he has been claiming time and time again is that and this should be stated from every rooftop, is that it is unimaginable and ridiculous that Epstein has been arrested and convicted twice for running a ring of pedophilia, and Ghislaine Maxwell is in jail for the same exact thing. And many of the victims have come forward and testified publicly that they were victimized, but for some reason, none of the criminals, aside from Epstein himself, of course, have been arrested. it is truly unbelievable. We know that there are hundreds, maybe thousands of people who are involved in the heinous acts, right? We're not talking about went to a party, emailed him, actually in the heinous acts, doing horrible things to children, going to his island, doing creepy things, right? We know that there are thousands of people and nothing happened to any of them over at least 4 administrations. So that's the real story here. And that's what we have to continue claiming. Getting the documents is nice. Getting the documents for JFK's assassination. JFK's assassination, though, was so long ago, you really can't do anything about it. Here, many of the people who committed these crimes, like Bill Gates, are still around, are still involved, are still funding many things, like Reid Hoffman, like Bill Gates, and like many others, specifically with underage people. So that's what we should really keep our attention to, is who's being prosecuted, who's being arrested for these crimes, not just who was mentioned in the documents. That's a lot less relevant. Obviously, it could be very interesting too, but less critical. Interesting, another discovery was that Epstein had a lot of involvement with the Russian government as well, and a lot of Russian oligarchs and his security guards and not his pilots, I don't think, but a whole bunch of the people that he was hanging around with were involved with FSB and Russian intelligence. He actually threatened people that if they don't listen to him, then he'll send the FSB on them. So it's obviously he had involvements with Ehud Barak, who's a vile person. He was the former prime minister of Israel, very hardcore left-wing person. A notable discovery that we had from newly released documents is that Ehud Barak was talking to Epstein about possibly importing 1 million Russians, supposedly non-Jewish Russians, but maybe related to Jews or something like that, because then they can get Israeli citizenship, but importing them to Israel to have better chances of winning the election. So like we saw with Biden do, where for the Democrats, in order for them to win elections, importing people, he was trying to do that to Israel as well. So that was surprising. He was a very violent. People try and assume that because he was involved, it means that the Mossad is involved. It means that everything else, that Epstein was an operative. It doesn't necessarily mean much. Barak was just a really despicable person who, when he finished with politics, became very close with Epstein. He wasn't close with Epstein, to the best of my knowledge, when he was in the Department of Defense or anything like that. So that was interesting as well. Back to Don Lemon. Don Lemon said, "I'm a Christian, and I think he's as Christian as he is as Christian as I am Jesus," basically. Again, I don't know what's in his heart, but I seriously doubt that man is a hardcore Christian. And it was reminiscent of the clip we recently saw of Mamdani, who, to tie things together, there are a lot of videos and images of Mamdani's mother, who was very much involved with Epstein now, and even pictures of young Mamdani hanging out with Epstein. That was definitely new to me. But Mamdani he was just in New York, and he was saying, the Prophet Muhammad taught us that just like he was accepted into Medina, that we have to accept immigrants. Interesting to note that what he didn't mention is that the Prophet Muhammad later forced everybody in Medina to convert to Islam, and if they didn't, he completely murdered them in cold blood. And that it's also worth noting that almost no Muslim countries let in any immigrants whatsoever. So just an interesting note in people using the name of the Lord, quote unquote, or the name of the Prophet, quote unquote, in order to justify illegal immigration. What do you think about that?
I think it's nonsense, as usual, just typical nonsense. And listen, the issue with Don Lemon is that I'm glad he was arrested, because it draws a line in the sand for other people to discourage other people from doing this. I doubt much will come of it. We'll see. But the bottom line is his defense that he's a journalist is absolutely idiotic. And I'll cover that in a minute. Tell you what, let's hear what the left-wing TMZ has to say. This is Harvey Levin, who we know he and his crew is very left-leaning. When it was announced that Charlie Kirk had passed away, his team started cheering, and unfortunately they were live on camera. Then they came up with some cockamamie story that they were cheering because there was a car chase, and I actually saw the video of the car chase, and it was so benign. There was no one who would ever cheer to that. They were cheering because they were happy that someone had passed away.
We hope you found our clip segment informative. For more content, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and watch the full episode.